the placenta, there is one aura. The moment now we're cutting into this aura, now we're gaping this open. And our aura is our first line of defense. Babies, if they are born in a traumatic way or there's other parts of their bodies they need to heal, it can be very hard for their body or their vitality to heal this aura. We were born connected, and there was a disconnection ritual that actually happened. People stopped even asking, why did we cut this in the first place? It just has become so standard that we do.
I'd love for you to talk about when you recognized that your career had to be put on ice and that your role as mother was the priority.
The baby, their saliva, when they attach to the nipple, they communicate with each other. So exactly what that baby needs in that exact moment is exactly what mom can alchemize and produce. I was like, I'm gonna have to quit my job and exclusively breastfeed this baby. Our babies are being born, but it really is also the death and rebirth of us. Women really do meet their most powerful selves in birth. There's a reason why they sabotage that moment in so many ways, because they know that. What is a higher calling ever than raising the next generation?
Hi, and welcome back to Reclamation Radio. I'm Dr. Kelly Brogan, and today I sit down with the lovely Veda Ray, whose chief credentials include that she is a wife and a mother. She supports families in the experience of a sovereign imprint around conception, pregnancy, childbirth, and beyond. This is a masterclass, so you're welcome, because I wanted to make sure to showcase her wisdom, the inspiration that she brings to this realm that can sometimes be very, very fear saturated, and the practical application of a lot of this wisdom. So we get into the surprising role that the placenta plays that will keep you from delayed cord clamping and cord banking, or even drying your placenta to eat it postpartum. We get into how to clear the imprints of traumatic birth, even from your ancestors, let alone your own birth. We talk about circumcision. We talk about why and how not to register your child for a birth certificate and social security number. We also talk about breastfeeding, the magical nature of breast milk, and why pumping is simply not the same thing. So those are just some highlights. Let's get into it. Thank you, Veda, for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
So I was yapping at you before I pressed record about this arena of birth reclamation, all things antenatal, pregnancy, postpartum, and how they interface with this concept of sovereignty. And I was sharing with you that I've been in the reproductive space for some time now because my conventional specialization as a psychiatrist was in reproductive psychiatry. So I specifically specialized in medicating pregnant and breastfeeding women and found myself in a position to help them take medication, believe it or not. So before I took a sharp left, I was already in this realm, like a steward, let's say, of this transition for women. When I decided to focus on deprescribing and helping women to come off of medication, I also was pregnant for the first time and then the second time. And I had natural births and home birth, not because I was some sort of bohemian, like Earth Mama, and was like tapped into my, God channel and knew the right way to bring these beings into the world. Believe it or not, I did that because of the published literature. Like I competitively researched obstetrical data, and I came to the conclusion, again, this wasn't like I wasn't on social media, like it wasn't because there was a zeitgeist of this. I came to the conclusion that their interventions were not evidence-based and I wasn't going to participate. And the birth experiences that I had, even though in that sort of semi-limited way, right, changed my experience of embodied womanhood forever. And you could argue initiated me to what it is, right? To be a woman. Although I do want to talk about archetypes, the maiden and the mother archetype, because I think I forestalled that transition as a career woman for a good long time. Regardless, I became a very angry activist. And one of my hot topics, and arguably the slowest to transmute, like I can still get my panties in a serious bunch about the subject of birth. Like honestly, all I need to see is a photo of a baby in like hospital blankets or a hospital hat to feel my heart close, like slam shut.
No, there's a visceral feeling. I know exactly what you mean.
So I know what it is to come at the world of awareness around birth and all things new baby from the energy of like retaliative reclamation, right? Like kind of like fuck you energy. And I actually, because life is a mirror, I received death threats literally with pictures of my home in 2016 around the time I was on Joe Rogan because of a home birth blog. Of all the things I've yapped about, it was a home birth blog that incited the ire of probably a lot of like subsidized trolls, like AstroTurf trolls through Jezebel, this like seemingly organic feminist platform. Anyway, they came at me. And that was when I started to see that I wasn't actually representing the women, right? Like I didn't know that I would be tripping wires for other women. I thought I was like here, right? Joan of Arcing for them. Anyway, so I have come through many, many years of angry activism around pregnancy and birth. And because I've taken off my activist hat, I don't really pay a ton of attention these days to the fight. Okay. When I came across your work and specifically a previous interview that you'd done with Alec Zeck, I just felt my heart like blossom open. And I listened with rapt attention and this very tender, and I'm sure many of the women who are listening will encounter this over the course of the conversation, this very tender, it's like a tension between what could have been, like grieving what could have been, and the satisfaction of remembering, right? And I felt that throughout the conversation. And I just experienced you as one of the great modern day ambassadors of this reclamation because of your energy, because you hold the remembrance with such a sweetness and a softness and an invitation, which I would describe as like a feminine energy. And I don't feel, although we'll talk about how this looked for you, fear as the driver. And I have two, and then I'll conclude my app. I have two teenage daughters. And one of the most important things to me in the world, like top 3 priorities for my life, is that they experience the beauty of childbirth in the way that women are meant to birth babies, right? Are designed to birth babies, spiritually. And I also know that leading with fear and providing all the stats about not only, what can go wrong with hospital-based interventions, but then what happens in marriages when you circumcise and like just all of these stats I've been accumulating over the course of, 15 years. I know that the way is inspiration. I know that the way is to transfer and transmit exactly what it is that I felt, in listening to you. So I feel like this is going to be one of the more important conversations I air on this podcast of many important conversations. And I'm just so delighted. And I really want to almost like chronologically in this imaginal birth process from conception to the establishment of relative personhood, quote unquote, I want to take folks through what it is that you have discovered. But maybe we can start from this energetic motivation, right? Like, was it ever fear that drove you? Has it always been, as you say, that you've been inspired by your unborn babies, and what does that even mean? So I'd love to take us back to your catalytic experience and really just march along, beginning with conception, and lay a beautiful template for the folks.
Oh, I love that. First, I want to say thank you. That was like the biggest compliment you ever gave me. With that, I that means so much to me that what I said landed the way that I hoped it would. So thank you. I would say my story starts just before I got pregnant, actually, because I spent my whole life outsourcing my authority. I spent my whole life seeking doctors for all the answers. So I essentially had to go through a medical crisis of begging for doctors, begging for a savior, basically to figure out what was wrong, what was going on. My hormones were just like, they were crazy. It always sounds funny for me to say this, but I went through a time in my life, like right after I got married, I started lactating and I started growing a beard. Okay. Like I started like things were so crazy and I'm like, what is going on? I'm seeing all these doctors and none of them are telling me like, well, you've been on birth control since you were 15. You've had an IUD, you've had whatever, everything under the sun. I've been on every hormone, whatever. So anyway, after a health crisis of finally getting to a point where doctors were not giving me any answers, I finally was like, maybe I just need to like stop taking all of this, detox my body, and maybe that's what my body needs. Maybe my body knows what to do. So at this point too, with this health crisis, essentially they were telling me I had this brain tumor and that I would never be able to have kids and all sorts of different things. So I didn't really put that on my radar. It's funny because at that space that I was at in my life, I was very much in a fearful state of the world is a scary place. Like, why would you ever bring kids into this world? So I kind of didn't want to have kids either. That was kind of like settled. Like I would not bring kids into this doomsday world. So there was that, which is kind of interesting how I like manifested into my life and my reality, not being able to have kids because of that belief. So anyway, I finally realized maybe, just maybe I need to release everything that I've been on for all this time. My body maybe knows what to do and go from there. I just started realizing that I was actually, everything is spiritual before it's physical. So I really started digging into my emotions. And that's what really started me diving deep, I guess, into the true, like our physical body is just telling us something. And what are we listening to? You know? So I started asking my body because never in my world had I ever asked anyone. I was asking everyone else, what's going on? I never asked my body. So I started asking my body. My body was saying, release, like just detox. I literally cold turkey. And I'm not saying I recommend this for everyone, but I just cold turkey, stop taking all these medications because I don't know. Anyway, then I felt like I started this like daily meditation because I started realizing in my realization of my emotional journey and my physical journey that my feminine and masculine were so out of balance. And that's what my body was telling me. So I was ready to just embrace my feminine energy because I'd been living in my masculine my whole life. So that's when I was like, okay, I'm ready for that feminine energy. I'm ready for that breakthrough. I'm ready for that thing that's just going to stretch and grow me. And I knew I was just on the verge of this breakthrough. And I'd meditated on that every single day, feeling ready to receive that part of me. And then I got pregnant. So out of nowhere, which was a big surprise. And so that honestly changed. That was my quantum leap for everything because I didn't know a single thing about birth. Not a thing. Like none of my friends had home births or anything like that. I had one friend that had a midwife in a hospital and that was like, whoa, like that was like out there. So she had told me, she's like, watch The Business of Being Born. So I had watched that. And so that was pretty eye-opening on like the business aspect of it. So I kind of did what she did. I started going to the hospital and we had 2 appointments with a midwife at the hospital. And there were like 7 midwives there. And the first 2 I met, I told my husband, I'm like, if that's the person that shows up the day of my birth, I'm going to be really disappointed. So I remember going home with him that day and having lunch after our second appointment. And I was like, I feel like I've disappointed myself in so many different ways in my life. And I can't disappoint myself anymore because I have someone else depending on me. And I don't feel good about this path. So I don't know what the path is, but I know that it's something else. So let's figure that out. So really that's when I started kind of my daily my daily ritual of connecting to my baby every day in the shower and just asking him, basically just saying, I don't know what I need. I don't know what I want, but I need you to guide me. So show me the way. And so I just put it down. I would just put it out there and then I would just put it down. And over time, the things that would show up on my Instagram feed or the people that I would meet that would walk into the room and say the right thing. And I was able to meet the right midwife at the time, and all the information just flooding through was just so, I couldn't deny the synchronicities, just because I knew that I was asking every day and the answers were being received.
Let me ask you, Vid, I want to double click on that, because for the pregnant women or to be pregnant women listening, they might wonder what that means. And they might get in their head this notion like, oh, I should be talking to my baby. I don't know how to talk to my baby. So now I'm like not doing anything. I should be doing all of that. So what I'm hearing you say is that you intentionally, I love that it was in the water too, that you intentionally asked and then you went about your life, and these leads and signs that were very clearly placed in front of your eyes and brought to your awareness sort of lit the path for you. It wasn't necessarily that you heard in the moment of the request some sort of clear, definitive answer. It was just the way that things unfolded for you, right?
Absolutely. Yep, exactly. I didn't ever get like a response or words or strong feelings. It was just things that like, for example, like I remember randomly scrolling through Instagram and I see this post and I don't even think I was following this person. Like it was just one of those things. I'm like, that's weird. And it said, if you're pregnant, look up a lotus birth. And I was like, okay. I mean, I just took the signs, you know what I mean? And it was so just there. So I just knew that because I was putting it out there and things were landing in my lap that just never had before, I just trusted that was the guidance. And I was just following the omens, really. It's really all it was. And it all felt right. Like really, we were guided, man, down a path I never ever would have thought I would have gone down, with just learning about birth and how it truly is the initiate. Like, I mean, pregnancy is so divine to me. I realized that if you want to like fast track your healing, pregnancy is what will allow you to do that, because everything in the world is going to start boiling up to the surface. And throughout this guidance with my baby, he started making me look into my family history, which is something that it actually shocked me when I was kind of being guided down that path, because I was like, that is actually crazy because I'm pregnant and I don't even know my own birth story. So as I started being guided to do some research, I started researching and I realized my great-great-grandmother had two stillborn babies. My great-grandmother had a stillborn. My grandma had a stillborn. My mother, she did not have a stillborn, but she experienced postpartum depression almost as if she did. So it was this realization to me of like all these different things that I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel like my job is to bring a lot of this to consciousness and let it go, so that I'm not bringing this on or dumping on my baby. Because just as I was kind of going through my emotional realization of my emotions affect my body, how our ancestral stuff, all of these things, because I started thinking like, do I want to bring a baby into the world where I'm dumping all of my stuff onto him? I don't, because I feel like my job in this world has been I've kind of been dumped on. And I'm grateful for those lessons, to be honest, really grateful, because it's allowed me to see the darkness and alchemize it. And I felt like his purpose was to show me that so that I could bring it to consciousness, just see it.
Just see it. Yeah. Yeah. It's such a good clarification, just to bear witness, intentional witness, because in the family constellation world, as you may know, miscarried babies and aborted babies are a part of the system. And as long as they are excluded, which can simply mean that they're not attended to, in the minds and hearts of those who are connected to them, they can pull right on future experiences. So you did this awareness generating work while you were pregnant.
Yeah. So to me, it was just very clear that I just needed, just like you said, to bring into attention to it, to give it an awareness and be a witness to it, and then let it go. it was clear to me that that's what it wanted. And then me just diving down my own birth story, seeing how many of those imprints, even my own conception, had affected different areas of my life and how I was kind of playing those out in different scenarios of my life. So I'll say, for example, one of the things that I connected of the many. So when I got pregnant, it was unexpected. Me and my husband had this really big trip planned to the Philippines that we had been really, really excited about. And so when we found out I was pregnant, we were both like, well, what about that trip? Which actually it breaks my heart to think that that was my first thought. Because this little baby, it actually makes me really emotional to think about, because I didn't know he even existed for the first few weeks. And the moment that I found out, it wasn't like, I'm so excited to greet you. It was, well, dang, what about that trip? You know? So, as I was researching my own, story, I was kind of a, oh shit, baby. You know what I mean? Like my mom got pregnant really quick after my older sister. So we're 16 months apart. Anyway, they were in a place in life where they were ready to quite get pregnant. So I know like that was my imprint as well. So here I was repeating that pattern. And then I started recognizing how many ways in my life have I repeated this pattern of feeling unwanted, and how really just that imprint needed awareness. It needed to be witnessed so that I could let it go, and allowed me to have all these conversations with my baby. Again, I didn't necessarily ever feel like quite spoken back to, but I felt like I could tell him, I'm so sorry. That was my first response. You are so wanted and you are so loved, and that had nothing to do with you and everything to do with me, you know? So it just really allowed me to heal. I want to say just witness. And that was like such a release for me in all these different ways of recognizing, and just in my life, seeing how I created these beliefs.
You know, first of all, I just so relate to this archetype of the defended woman you described being in your masculine, right? Concerned with the logistics of the future and how they might be derailed, right? Like that's so relatable. And, you know, on a metaphysical level, it's a rejection of life. Like it's a reflexive rejection of life, not just literally, but figuratively, right? Fighting with life. And that habit is so ingrained in most of our experiences. It's arguably the root of all suffering, that I'm not sure many would extrapolate an imprint on that baby, you know, but I've as somebody who is divorced from the father of my children, I have looked into extensively, you know, these imprints in the setting of divorce, what it means, right? So I am blessed that I not only have a harmonious dynamic with him, but that I would actually still choose him of all the men I've ever met to be the father of my children, right? And that translates to my daughters as feeling, because I've discussed this with them, as feeling like they were meant to be here. Even if we were not meant, or we would still be together, we were not meant to be together as parents in that way, as a couple in that way. And so when you think about the acrimonious divorces and the ways that women, because obviously I'm speaking from a woman's perspective, the ways that women reject and punish, you know, the fathers of their children in the setting of separation, and sometimes, of course, it seems highly justified. The message to the child that you both conceived is, I reject half of you, all right? Like I reject your paternal origins. And so coming to peace with conception, obviously this can be quite a spiritual exercise if the conception happened under duress or violence or aggression, or even just non-consent of any variety. However, most of the cases that I've worked with are kind of what you described. Like there was ambivalence, there was confusion, there was overwhelm. And what is the message that is sent? I love this word that you use, imprint, because, you know, I've had Joel Schaefer on the podcast. We talked about conception sex, right? Like what does it translate from a Castaneda perspective? Like what did he teach about the kind of sex that you were conceived through and how it ripples forward in your relationship to the erotic, both in a sexual capacity, but even in a vital capacity? And so what I hear you saying is that these imprints come in all of these stages, right? From conception to learning about the pregnancy, then to relating to it over the course of these.
Yeah. Like literally everything. Like what were the thoughts during conception? You know what I mean? All of these things and that's actually where I really dove down in my birth, or as my imprint, was my experience on like, what did I believe? Because obviously my DNA by body knows. So before asking my mom even her scenario, what was it like to be with dad when you're pregnant with me? I wrote all the feelings down, where it was like, what were my mom and dad's relationship like when I was pregnant? Where was my dad even at the time? Or all of these different things, baby knows. And believe it or not, I mean, we were an egg and we were a sperm separately and in consciousness. So there was a moment of coming to, and it's like in this moment of, again, even conception, were there pornographic images in that time too? There's all of these different things that can kind of, when you start thinking about them, life starts making sense in so many different ways, I think. And again, most of the time it's just a witness to let it go. And to me, life started making sense in so many different ways on my own imprints and how I was living out my life, which created kind of my core beliefs about life and how I could create a new imprint.
Right. Because, I imagine what you would say to a woman who's listening who feels that burden of responsibility, which is a part of taking responsibility, is that it initially feels burdensome. That's just kind of how it works. So the woman listening who's feeling that self-consciousness, almost like every single thought and feeling is somehow hexing, the experience of the baby, what would you say? Would you just point towards the possibility and potential that exists always, like in every moment that's unfolding? Or how would you recommend to relate to that?
Well, I mean, really what I did is I just started going into the field, like personally, I went into the feeling. Like, what did it feel like for me to be a baby that my parents were like, oh, dang, like I felt the feelings, just brought it up, wrote it down in my journals. Really, I saw it for what it was, which is a kind of a whole interesting story in itself, because my mom had a very different lens on our birth experience too. So that was kind of interesting. But really what I ended up doing is I started meditating on this image of what it felt like to be born consciously, or I guess conceived consciously, gestated consciously, and birthed consciously, being wanted to like right into the hands of a mother and father. And I could feel that in my bones as I created this image over and over in my head. And that slowly, to me, started creating new patterns in my life, because I actually could create a new reality. So that's kind of what I did. And that's what worked for me. Yeah. I mean, it's going to be different for everyone. To me, just an awareness, and then me deciding I'm going to create something new. What does that feel like? Because I started realizing we are the creators of our reality. Okay. Our thoughts and our feelings create our reality. And a lot of the time we can know something, but if we don't feel it, that doesn't project. So for me, creating this image essentially and living it out over and over again created a feeling inside my body that I felt it.
So describe that, because, so much of this reminds me of Neville Goddard's like revisioning work, right? So that you can go back and rewrite and also project into the now and future what is wanted. And I imagine that because of the imprints we are coming from, so many of us, like, we don't even know how to access the imaginal realm of what pregnancy could feel like. So I wonder if you could just go on a poetic flourish about how in your exalted heart, you feel it's meant to be.
Yeah, I love that question. Yeah, I remember when I first started thinking on my own birth story, it's like, how could I possibly know that? How could I possibly know my own birth story because I was a baby? But when you realize like we were consciousness and our body never forgets, if we can sit and tune into it, our body actually will tell us. And it doesn't tell us in words, because babies don't even have words. It'll tell us in a feeling. And what's so interesting is I started recognizing certain feelings that I would experience in scenarios, and then I could match it to a feeling as I was going through this deep dive of my own birth. You know what I mean? Even that feeling of feeling unwanted, I could then feel it in a scenario where maybe I felt rejected by someone. My body felt it. So, to me, it's not even, I think, yeah, I don't even want to like portray that I'm like this, person that is so intuitive and I just like, I receive all of these answers. Cause this was me trying to like just learning to trust myself again, if that makes sense. So I started with little things on, for example, like when I did all of this with my birth story, it actually felt very traumatic for me personally. It felt like if I were to ask myself the question, how did it feel for a stranger to touch your hands? You know, it felt to me, you know, how did it feel? It didn't feel good. It felt cold. It felt like a alien invasion kind of abduction. If I'm being real, if I were really to try and go there. It felt to me when I was like, was your umbilical cord cut? I asked myself that question and I would just go with the first thing that came up. Rather than sitting and thinking on things, I was like, yes. Were you wiped away, whisked away? Yes. Like that felt right. That felt right. So I just kind of, instead of sitting on it too often, I just kind of, what's the first thing that comes forward? Was I born with an epidural? Yes. All those different things. Was I induced? Yes. So anyway, I do all of this. I actually call my mom later and I'm like, will you tell me about my birth story? And she was like, it was so beautiful. You were delivered. I mean, you were in a hospital, but it was just beautiful. You came out. They put you on my chest right away. We breastfed. It was beautiful. And I thought that was so interesting because that is not anything about how I kind of experienced when I was asking myself these questions. So I thought that was strange, but at the same time, I was like, you know, I know two people can experience something together and have very different lenses. That's so valid. So I just kind of, I don't know, I think I second guessed myself with asking her. Anyway, 2 weeks later, she calls me and she's like, you know what? I just pulled out my journal from 4 days after you were born. And she reads me this journal entry and it is just as I had experienced, which I thought was so interesting. And I've kind of validated my feelings because I was going on this like questioning of myself. But I thought that was kind of interesting too, kind of how it was a very traumatic experience for her actually too, and how her mind kind of protected herself from that trauma of the experience of having me. I had meconium and, you know, whisked away, wiped away, you know, the whole bit, which I was like, yeah, that feels right to me. So, I would just say for people, if that's something they feel called to experience, like to ask themselves these questions, don't even ask your mother that was there or anyone else that was there. Ask yourself. And the first thing that comes to mind, just go with it. All it's wanting to do is to be witnessed. And to me, I just started realizing too, like, okay, being induced, those kinds of things. How many ways in my life have I felt like I wasn't ready? You know, and that's kind of the feeling I come back to. And I feel like it's allowed me to even just shift my beliefs as I'm experiencing life to realize that was an imprint and it doesn't need to be anymore. And I don't know. I don't know if I answered your question really.
If you're an overachieving, under-receiving woman, you may already know that the sleep, energy, weight, skin, hair, and digestive struggles you're chronically trying to hack are somehow related to the bitterness, overwhelm, resentment, and exhaustion you struggle with in your work, mothering, and relationship. I couldn't be more thrilled to announce that after 15 years in the clinical and digital trenches as a holistic psychiatrist and coach, I have packaged the heroine's journey home to ease, soft power, and the capacity to handle more of the challenges life brings and to hold more of the abundance. It's called the Relaxed Woman System, and it includes my history-making 44-day nervous system reset. It's the only one available with published proof of its efficacy, as well as the path to truly embodying your femininity so that you can experience the specific pleasure of who you are, as well as access to the insider resources for living the relaxed woman lifestyle that I'm known for curating. It's a 6-month tailored journey, all for less than $2,000, and is designed to be the very last self-improvement program you ever invest in. Head over to kellybroganmd.com/RWS. So in the exploration of what might be informing our perception as pregnant women around the pregnancy itself and then the birth that is upcoming. The clearing of these imprints can simply be acknowledging and also opening to receive and trust, what comes into awareness. And I guess what I'm still asking is that there then is a void, right, left for most women, where the idea of how to relate to this experience as a guardian of, life force energy, this experience of creation, right? How to defrag all of the programming that says, it's about 10 fingers and 10 toes. I was somebody who, in my conventional moments, when I was looking at the published literature on psychotropic drugs, most of what I looked at was teratogenicity data, meaning, is there a signal of harm that's arising when women are taking these meds during pregnancy? And for the most part, this is back, 15 years ago. But for the most part, the answer was no. Why? Because they were looking at the material realm. Of course, this is allopathy, right? So they're looking at, are the babies being born with all their digits, and their skin intact and their head attached. And the concept of, even the future emotional, psychological, it was just beginning to be explored, like the longitudinal data. But there will never be, by virtue of the field itself, there will never be an exploration of the metaphysical, right? Of the spiritual, of the relevance of birth to the mother, infant, dyad, to the mother-father union, to the community at large, to the natural realm, right? So nobody's researching that. Don't hold your breath. So the inspiration around pregnancy and a mother's role, right? And this liminal transition from maiden to mother, I find comes from stories of women who have birthed in a certain way, right? And had experiences that weren't just like mine in ways where I just didn't have the bad experiences for the most part, right? And that's not to suggest that my home birth wasn't one of the peak experiences of my life, because it was. But when I heard you talk about lotus birth, which I've only ever like heard about as like, oh, it's kind of cool. Sometimes the baby can crawl up to the breast, and isn't that almost like a novelty, right? Like if you leave them attached, like it just sort of makes sense for some couples. And I'm totally, huge free birth supporter, like totally on board with all that. But I never quite experienced the heart opening inspiration around this topic that I did when I listened to you talk about it. So I feel like if we dive into that subject, it will answer the question that I have for women on behalf of women, which is like, okay, if I don't feel scared and overwhelmed, then what is there to feel, right? Like, am I supposed to feel excited? Am I supposed to feel, joyous? Well, I don't feel that. So where does the inspiration come from? And at least for me, when I hear about the spiritual nature, right? And I don't use that term lightly, trust me. But when I hear about it, I feel a remembrance. I feel like, oh, right, that's what this is about, right? It's not just the material transfer of a body that grew inside of me, outside of me, the end, So yeah, I'd love for you to talk a bit about lotus birth as if nobody's heard of it, right? So an introduction to it and maybe some of the surprising aspects of it that you encountered in your process.
Yeah, randomly, like I said, I came across lotus birth on my Instagram. It's not something I'd ever even heard of before. So I researched lotus birth, and what it is, it's when you leave the baby, the umbilical cord and placenta all attached until it naturally detaches. So I thought that was really interesting. So I had found a new midwife at this point who was amazing. And I had asked her about it. And she was like, yeah, I mean, I've heard people doing that, but like, I've never heard of anyone like actually doing it. So I just started feeling so pulled to this. So I started really researching. It was really hard to find a lot of information online because there really aren't people out there doing that. I was asking everyone across the world, I feel like someone kind of guide me and nothing was showing up. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to go with this calling. It's really interesting that now in, realizing my own imprints on why I felt so called to it is I definitely was not born connected to my mother. I love her. She's such a wonderful woman, but it was never like, I see a lot of my friends that would text their moms every day and they were just best friends. And I never had that with my mom. Like we could go months and not talk and just, so for me, that was so, so, so important to keep that bond and connection to my baby and that imprint. So as I started researching lotus birth, it really started making me realize what an energetic thing it is. Because a lot of people start thinking, okay, so there's the placenta, baby's blood and stem cells are there. And so it all transfers to baby because we've all heard of, and maybe if you haven't, I don't want to assume, but delayed cord clamping, where really it's this concept where we're waiting to cut the umbilical cord because we want all the blood and stem cells to go into baby because a third of their blood is still in that placenta, which is quite interesting because hospitals, it is standard policy for them to clip it within the first 30 to 60 seconds. And around that 60-second mark is 60 to 90 seconds is delayed cord clamping in their mind. So they're really a third of your baby's blood is still in the cord and the placenta. So a lot of people are like, okay, here's the physical benefits. So once you have all the blood and the stem cells into baby, like what's the point of keeping the placenta together? Well, I started researching even deeper in this like concept of beyond that, everything beyond the first 24 hours is now you've entered the spiritual benefits of lotus birth because a baby in the placenta, there is one aura. They share one aura. So the moment now we're cutting into this aura, now we're gaping this open. And our aura is our first line of defense, whether it be like our immune defense, our spiritual defense of things coming in. And we all have this vitality of being able to heal this aura. But babies, if they are born in a traumatic way or something, and there's other parts of their bodies they need to heal, it can be very hard for their body or their vitality to kind of heal this aura. So there was that first concept. Then the next concept I started realizing is that we have these like meridian circuits in our bodies always running, right? One of those meridian circuits too is through this umbilical cord. And I read this through this book called Placenta, the Forgotten Chakra, which I highly recommend everyone read if they're feeling called to this. But it really, brought this concept of there is this forgotten cut that we've all forgotten. This was a big part of us. We were born connected and there was a disconnection ritual that actually happened because people stopped even asking, why did we cut this in the first place? It just has become so standard that we do. But this meridian is our own intuition, our own knowing, our own trust. And it's also this energetic connection between mother and baby. So all of these kind of being sabotaged into this disconnection ritual. And I'll kind of throw in even this concept of how it's ritualized in a way where dad is the one that gets to, like we're not really thinking about the things we're doing and why we just do. So I started really like, again, digging into like, why did I believe what I did? And in this concept, I started thinking in my mind, okay, so if I were the first person to get pregnant and I wasn't looking at everyone else and what they did, and I got pregnant and I trusted my whole pregnancy that this baby was growing and I just trusted the process. And then I birthed this baby and moments later, a placenta came out. In that moment, what I think everything was designed perfectly. And then suddenly it wasn't perfect and I needed to cut it. Like to me, I think I would leave it. I think it was designed to be that way, just like everything else had, just like the milk suddenly came into, I would be pleasantly surprised that a few days later it just fell off and just believe it was always meant to be that way. So to me, it like created this whole imprint beyond that of it's baby's sovereign imprint and their choice of when they're ready to fully transition earthside. And that was so important to me because it was just as important to me to give him that choice of when he was ready to be born as well. I didn't want to pick. We kind of live in a world and I don't want this to come off as shaming anyone because we just live in a world that is, we're making our induction dates so we can make it to our hair appointment, the next day, So for me, as I was just researching, I'm like, to me, it just felt a big value that my baby choose the day they were born and the moment they were, and I trust that. It also was really important that I trust that they were ready to transition and let that go when they were ready. So there was this concept that really held true to me, was this placenta it literally physically is the DNA twin of the baby. Okay. They share a DNA, but that it's kind of the spiritual guide of the baby as well, where it comes into the world with them. They're born together. And although the placenta dies physically, that placenta energy is always there advocating for this baby in the invisible world, and gives them this knowing and confirmation of the world's not afraid, like a scary place. I'm always being watched out. So I think on my own kind of imprint of like being cut, like we all have these fears of death and what is it like in the next world? Like what would it feel like if we didn't have those fears because we had this knowing, and that this invisible energy, I guess, and maybe it sounds crazy, but it feels good to me. This is the same energy that is also guiding baby to transition into the next. So it came with and it leaves with. And yeah, I just love that. Anyway, that book really touched me. And I was like, I'm doing a freaking lotus birth. So I did it. It's something you can't explain into words. It's something you have to feel. And I kid you not, because I did it with both my babies, and them choosing, like the moment their umbilical cord just popped off and they were ready, like we both just like landed on earth. Like I physically felt my capacity expand, and all my fears of, as I was pregnant, I always kind of worried, like, am I going to be able to show up in the way that my babies need me to? Am I going to be enough? And like, I physically felt myself have this capacity. It was magical for both of us to suddenly be like, we're here. And it was like 3 days later, because we were not on earth for, a few days before and a few days after. So anyway, that was my experience with lotus birth.
So beautiful. And, for those listening who feel what I call a little yes about this, or a big one, and you can, opt out of so many things: cord banking, delayed cord clamping, but also the whole world of desiccating the placenta and then eating it, right? Because that is not an option, right? Then I want to share, because I find this so amazing, that you have kits, right? Like you provide kits based on your experience to facilitate this for women. I think that is so cool, because there are ways to keep the placenta for the days until it naturally detaches, right?
Yeah. So it really does make you be really intentional, and it creates a ceremony around it, which I really love. It allows you to sit and you see baby, and honestly, you touch the placenta and you see how your baby feels. Like they are one, and it is like truly magical, where you're breastfeeding them and you're seeing it pulse. Like they really are one. So it just shows to me, even as I was seeing, how it really is so clear that we're thinking they're not connected when we're cutting it. They really do feel it. But as you're creating this ceremony of washing the placenta, and you're putting salts and herbs and you're preserving it, and you're like really honoring this organ and what it's done, it is really, really beautiful. So yes, you are preserving it. You're not just letting, because it will rot if you don't, because it is kind of like meat. So you would salt it just like you would meat, which that sounds weird, but but yeah, so you have absorbent pads, and then you just salt it, herb it, put it in a little bag. So what sounded like really inconvenient became a lot more convenient when it's just this little sack next to your baby. And again, when we live in a world where convenience is so easy, that the placenta is so inconvenient, but where I don't know any other way, I honestly wouldn't do it any other way. So both me and my husband are like, we would never, it will always be lotus birth for us. But yeah, it was really simple, because really it fell off like 2 to 3 days later for us. And so it really is it's such a short period of time. And it really was so intentional that it was just, we didn't have any other visitors. It was just us. And it really, really forced us to be that way, which I really loved. You're not passing a baby around with a placenta. You're not bringing a baby to the store with a placenta. It really made you be home. You're skin to skin. You're so intentional. And I really loved that part of it, which I feel like it was designed to do.
Absolutely. It's the only thing that makes sense, once you hear this. So before we move on to another service that you provide around, birth certificate, Social Security, and an alternate path, I want to touch on the subject of circumcision because you have a son, so you clearly have navigated this. And I trained obviously in a hospital. I did obstetrics in New York City, and I myself participated in circumcisions as an intern and a med student. And everything that all the whistleblowers are saying is true. And when I heard you talk about really just the summary of the ritual, it was from an energy of like, does this really make sense? Right? Because there's some, crusading against this that can take on the actual energy of something this heinous and fighting it. And trust me, I understand that because I've lived that. I've been that activist who, becomes the monster, fighting the monster, because this is one, and we don't need to, go too far down the rabbit hole, but this is one of those subjects that can startle you out of the trance. And then it feels like you woke up, in mid-surgery or something, right? Like it's so dark. So yeah, I wonder if you could just maybe describe how you and your husband researched this, learned about this, decided about this, what it looks like for you to come to the conclusion that you came to.
Yeah. So it's so funny because luckily I had kind of gone through that medical crisis before I got pregnant. So I knew to kind of question medicine, but I also was like really unpacking all of my beliefs. 2020, all of it. Like I was really like Marie Kondoing my mind in a way that I was like, is this true? Why do I believe this? And why do I hold this belief to be true? So I remember like right when I got pregnant and we announced to my mom and my stepdad that we were going to have a baby, right away my stepdad was like, oh, okay, cool. So are you guys going to vaccinate? And I was like, no, because I had gone down that rabbit hole. And then he was like, oh, are you going to circumcise? And I actually didn't have an answer for him. And my husband right away was like, well, yeah. And I was like, well, hold up, honey. I think this might be one of those things we need to research first. And sure enough, as I was putting out there, Guide the Way, this video came up for me and it's called The Elephant in the Hospital. And it totally spoke to me on all things circumcision. And in part of the video, it does show a baby getting circumcised. And to me, in consciousness, I could not do that to my baby. Hearing these screams of a baby, seeing what happens where it literally is like a fingernail, it's fused, right? They're ripping that off. And I think the statistic was that 90% at least of babies aren't numbed. They're given sugar water. And I even think if you were numbed, that's pretty traumatic as well. To me, I couldn't. So it just kind of led me down this rabbit hole. And same with my husband. It went down, he started opening his imprint of his own circumcision and how he had to go through his own healing. Because I do want to kind of make this quick plug that while I was going through my whole imprints on my birth, knowing my husband did all of this alongside me because he had his own birth and his own story he was coming in and bringing to consciousness as well. So we very much were a team and everything. It wasn't just me. He did all this too. So it was very, very interesting seeing him go through this healing experience of realizing he could never do that to his own babies. And just the research out there actually is crazy to think that why do we think babies aren't born perfect? And why would we think, like, for example, like our earlobes, what are they for? If we decided foreskin didn't have a function, should we all be cutting off our earlobes? Like, it honestly seemed crazy. And in the video too, it gave an analogy of like ethics. And it was saying, okay, so they say cancer is like one of the things that you want to circumcise for. So would it be ethical to remove the breast buds of little girls because it would prevent breast cancer? That sounds crazy, right? And it's so funny that we start thinking it sounds crazy to circumcise girls, but for boys, that's just so like, it really, I feel like as I started unpacking it, really showed the level of brainwashing that we ever thought that was normal in the first place. So it really did, just like you said, it can jolt you out of a sleep almost, because you're like, what reality are we really living in? That we're doing this to perfect boys, and the number that babies actually do die during circumcision. And this is an elective surgery. This isn't like your teeth busted in and you need surgery. This is elective. So obviously for us that we're like, we would never do, like, it was an absolute no for us. So anyway, I highly recommend people watch that video too, and then continue to research. And for us, it was a hard no.
I mean, it's like so many of these interventions, including vaccination. I mean, once you engage deep enough inquiry, once you ask enough questions, deeper and deeper and deeper questions, you get to you get to expose the why not, right? So meaning like most of us start to learn, and you listed many of the adverse outcomes, right? Of the risks, of the really scary nature of a lot of these interventions. And usually the why too falls away, right? Because you've shifted out of a consciousness paradigm that is fear-based, right? You've shifted out of that triangulation against the human body, against this sacred vessel. And so it would never make any sense. Like none of the cancer and the germ fear mongering, like none of that is even like what relevant, right? So most of the time, for example, if you're choosing not to vaccinate because, you think the risks are too intimidating, but you still are worried about catching the thing, you haven't asked deep enough questions about the nature of it, right? It's giving you the opportunity is the gift of unpacking all of these layers of your conscious programming. And once you ask deep enough questions, then it makes absolutely no sense to take the risk, but it also isn't even relevant to take the benefit because the benefit doesn't even make any sense in your world anymore, right?
I agree with everything you're saying because it's like because I guess my baseline is where I really started is my question to myself throughout my whole pregnancy was like, what did our pristine ancient ancestors do? The ones that lived so connected to earth and nature and God and their intuition, how did they live?
Well, we've been told they all died all the time, dropped dead in childbirth, dropped dead at, age 20, and they were like primitive cave people, right? So we've been told a lot of lies about that too.
We've been told a lot of lies and that we are like the enlightened version of these cavemen. And I don't believe that. I absolutely don't believe that. So I believe in a whole other version of what our pristine ancient ancestors and the wisdom that they carry. And that still lives within me when I ask myself. So that was kind of my baseline, that it's like our babies are born and milk comes in and that's how it's supposed to be. This divine, like hormones create surges of, in your baby when they are ready, their lungs finally develop and they say, hey, I'm ready. That creates a hormone and the whole process starts. Like I see everything as divine. And when you start asking yourself, why did we even do this in the first place? Rather than seeing the thing and saying, is it a benefit or not? It's like, why did we ever believe we were imperfect in the first place? Because that whole thing is a belief that we were imperfect, Yeah. So that was kind of my baseline.
Absolutely. Okay. So I think it goes without saying that traveling to a hospital and choosing to birth in a hospital is a form of consent to participation in a system, not only the trappings of the system as applies to birth itself and early postpartum, but the system in general and even the banking system, right, specifically. So I want to talk a bit about the birth certificate, its significance, what it represents. Maybe we could touch on the Social Security number as well, because as an adult woman, living woman, exploring sovereign paths to reclaiming my identity as a living person rather than, a fictitious entity, I've learned a lot about the role of the birth certificate. And of course, my kids, as I've mentioned, are teenagers, and the decision to participate on behalf of your child is quite a significant commercial decision on their behalf, let alone, the spiritual implications of handing them over, to the state as essentially a traded commodity. So, or at least their lifetime labor value. So I wonder if you could, summarize the fact that you learned about this in time. I mean, it's just so inspirational to me and amazing and wonderful. And yes, also gives me that twinge of like, oh, if only I knew, whatever in my case. And obviously I'm living proof, as are so many of our friends and colleagues, that there are ways to unwind. There are paths always. When you wake up to this remembrance, there's always a path out. It's built in, I think, actually, that way. So yeah, so maybe you can start by telling us what you learned about the significance of birth certificates, social security numbers, things that are automatically rendered, certainly in the hospital setting, but also in the home birth setting, with licensed midwives and.
Yes, absolutely. It's just as all the other things that I talked about. Like, you don't think about why you do something. It's just so standard. You cut the umbilical cord, you circumcise. It was one of those things where I just started unpacking on like the birth certificate. Why do we do that anyway? And why is it important that the state registers or keeps all these records? So that kind of led me down a whole rabbit hole as I started really unpacking that in a legal world that I never ever saw myself studying law or studying the commercial codes or whatever. I didn't think the birth certificate would take me there, but sure enough, there it goes. And yeah, so I started realizing that the birth certificate, what it is it's literally a legal contract, and we are literally handing over our babies the title to the state. In a short way of saying the national debt is backed by, they are human collateral for the national debt. And it's based on their future labor, what they're going to be paying in taxes. So the moment that baby is born, that's a dollar sign on their head, and what they're worth and how much the nation can back them by their physical labor. So once I knew that, I couldn't in good conscience do that, but I also didn't know a way to raise them without one, because all I knew was a commercial world of,
and in this setting, Veda, the social security number is an employee identification number, right?
Yes, it is an employee number. And if you really start looking back, when social security cards were first issued, Google it, 1930s social security card. It literally says employee signature. It is your employee number. So they literally do create a business out of your baby, and it's attached to that number, and everything we're buying with this social security number is ultimately owned by the state, our estate. So I actually started and I encourage everyone listening to look up the commercial code, and it says who can be assigned a social security number. And it says you can be assigned a social security number if you meet the following requirements. And I want you to notice that the word you is highlighted. You can click on it for a definition. Okay. Click on you and find out what you means. It says you, someone who owes a debt to the United States. So you are automatically saying, hey, I qualify because I owe a debt to the United States. So if that's really what we're opting into, which really was this aha of it's so you think you means you and I, but really it's this collateral that we've become in the whole system. So yeah, it was all very eye-opening to me. And then, in my world, being a mom, I just wanted to be able to set my little ones up for success without hindering them either. So I didn't want to think that I was making this decision on, well, I don't want to get them a birth certificate. I'm going to hinder them in not being able to go to school, or if they want to go to college, or all these different things. That felt selfish of me to say, no, I don't want to make this decision. So when I was pregnant too, I was asking my baby for guidance, and I was telling him, guide me to how I can raise you successfully without a birth certificate and a social security number. Because as far as I knew, you needed it for everything. So as I continued going down the rabbit hole and just being guided to different information, I really discovered that there were a few key things that you need to do. And really getting the passport was like the opener. Once you can get a passport, they can get a driver's license if they want. They can get a job in the commercial world if they want. They can travel. Gosh, I'm trying to think what else. They can really do everything because it shows them. And again, it was getting a passport based on nationality rather than citizenship, which was kind of another hole that I went down on what citizenship means versus claiming your nationality where you were born. So there was that. I'm like, okay, so if I can get the passport, but how do you get the passport without the birth certificate? So that's kind of what led me down this whole other realm of realizing you can create private records that allow you to get the passport. So essentially, as I was going down my own journey for other people, I've created these as offerings to help other people kind of walk you down this path of creating your own private records for your baby, using them to, I say it replaces the birth certificate, but I don't even like that term, because really the birth certificate replaced our private records in the first place. They are the original, and they actually are more, they hold more weight than a birth certificate even does, because a birth certificate is, anyway, this replacing what our private records are and how much they hold. So anyway, those were kind of things that I was like key opportunities for. And then I realized if I wanted my baby to be able to operate in commerce, in this commercial world, really, when we're born, they create a trust in our name, right? With that social security number. And so I started realizing that there's this way that the government operates. We can do this, mirror it, but in a private capacity. So where here they have the birth certificate. Here we can create our private records. Here they get the passport based on citizenship. Here we can get the passport based on our nationality. Here they create a trust in our name when we're using our social security number, where over here you can actually create a private trust and use that EIN intentionally and use it in commerce. So, and then over here, we're using a social security insurance trust fund, which is what it is. You can actually create an insurance fund, because all they're doing really is we're all insured, right? We're all employees, we're all insured, and we're all paying into this insurance trust fund. Why aren't we doing that ourselves? Creating life insurance policies that allow us to do our own private banking so that we never have to rely on the public banking system. So really, we can do all of this and operate completely privately, never even needing the public system. So that was, anyway, I discovered all of this and I was like, I need to share with other parents, because I would have done anything for guidance as I was going down my journey. And that's really why I created the whole platform, is so other people that feel called to this path have someone, because I would have done anything for it.
No, absolutely. And that's exactly the feeling when I learned about you. I of course think of my daughters. I'm like, I'm so glad Veda's doing this. Stick around, for another decade, please, because it's such a service, not only on an informational level as a translation of your research, but you live this way. And again, to me, when I, spend time in your energy, I feel there's nothing scary. Everything is okay. And transmitting that to especially new parents who are navigating this it's such a gift. I'm so, so grateful, and I think it's essential to know that you have this choice and that it is a choice.
Yes.
That's all. You can make it intentional.
Yeah. And actually I want to make note on that too, because it was important to me that I gave my little one a choice too, that if he chose the birth certificate was his path. I've actually set him up in a way that he can choose that too. I didn't take that choice from him. And I love what you mentioned too, because mothers and fathers that hear, oh no, I maybe made a mistake when they're starting to learn this and they've already done it. My firstborn actually has a birth certificate because I didn't know. I'd spent my whole pregnancy with him unpacking birth and the truth about birth and all this stuff. And then when I came to the birth certificate, I was like, okay, they give you 10 days. I didn't have enough time to study. So on my second pregnancy, when I was like, okay, now I've already unpacked birth, I get to spend my whole time unpacking this. So just know that nothing is, when you know who you are and you're not the birth certificate, it's actually, you just start standing deeper into yourself and as a man or a woman and knowing who you are. And you get to navigate and show your little ones, even if they have a birth certificate, how to play the game. Because we've all been born, how I was born, is we all thought we were the players in the Monopoly board. But when you realize that you're not, and you can zoom out and you're the actual player moving the player, and to be able to teach your little ones that is actually really a gift. So it's not something to be afraid of either. And that you just navigate life in a different way.
Absolutely. Yeah. From your spine. So before we wrap up, I want to talk about the subject of careerism, which I fondly refer to it for mothers. And a lot of my platform and this podcast has been devoted, for the past, probably a year or so to this subject, which I tuck under the loving umbrella of the dupe of feminism, right? And this notion of a career woman instead of a woman with a career, right? And what it is to prioritize mission, purpose, even service over your role as wife and mother. And because I do a lot of whistleblowing, it's probably most of what I do around choices that I made, ways that I took the poor bargain. This has been one that has been, the roots are very deep and very painful to excavate. And I'm also glad that I've had this remembrance before my daughters are out of the house, right? And I have created the conditions for me to prioritize my role as mother before, they're off into the wild blue yonder. So I went back to work at 6 weeks postpartum. I was a fellow in my specialized residency program, working at the hospital, pumping, all the things that come with that. And my second pregnancy, I was in private practice, and I went back to work 3 weeks postpartum because I wanted to, and I've explored on the podcast, what it is to leave bodily your baby as a mother in the first 3 years and the significance of that. I mean, that was one of the most painful subjects that I've ever talked about, because it's when you recognize that your hands are not replaceable by other warm hands, right? Because I had my loving parents in the mix and their wonderful father, and it doesn't matter. I'm the one who was in my Manhattan office, with serving these women in my practice instead. So, this has been quite a rude awakening on my part. And I know that you were working when you became a mother, and that transition, right? So I have only recently transitioned into the full embodiment. I don't know if it's full yet, but into the embodiment of the mother archetype. Like in the prioritization of my masculine values as a career woman, I forestalled the transition from maiden to mother. I truly believe that. And the attendant fulfillment and orientation to my reality, right? So reality feels like a nihilistic hellscape when you are living out of sync with your own native priorities, right? So I would argue my priorities have always been relational, and I lived as if they were, productive, achievement, success oriented, mission oriented, purpose oriented, as if they were in the doing realm. Right. I lived that way, but inside of myself, my priorities were always what they were. So that's a gaslight, right? It's running a gaslighting program on myself, and I'm not alone. This is why, lots of women relate to the subject at this moment. We're just remembering. So you, unlike so many of us, you got with the program in the moment, right? So I'd love for you to talk about when you recognized that your career had to be put on ice, if ever to be thawed, right? So, and that your role as mother was the priority.
Yeah, no, I love that question. I was working as a dental hygienist, and I loved my job. I loved what I did. It's still very much a passion of mine. And it's funny because actually when I got pregnant, my husband was unemployed. So when I got pregnant, I was like, well, I'm the breadwinner. I'm going to have to work. But I watched a lot of my other women coworkers that would try and pump between patients, and just how stressful that was, and how they were gone. They had a great schedule. I would say a hygienist actually has truly a wonderful schedule when it comes around being a mother, but really stressful during the day when they were, anyway, I saw that I didn't want that. But at the same time, I always thought if I ever did become a mom, that I would definitely be the career mom or the nanny mom, and I'd want that life. So I thought that's kind of how it started. And then as I was, again, following the omens, I was guided to one podcast episode that I listened to, and the woman, I can't even remember what the podcast was, but she was talking about how breast milk and how the baby, their saliva, when they attach to the nipple, they communicate with each other. So exactly what that baby needs in that exact moment is exactly what mom can alchemize and produce. And that's not just for physical things. It's for, nighttime. There's sleepy hormones that go into baby when it's time to sleep, or even when they're going through an emotional conflict. Mom knows exactly what to do to produce that. So they were saying, obviously the next best thing from actual feeding from the nipple is going to be pumping. But at the same time, when you're pumping, there isn't that communication going on. So you can grab milk from the freezer, and nighttime milk's going to be different from evening, morning milk too, just because of what your body's producing. And in that moment, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to quit my job because I want to exclusively breastfeed my baby. That was not something I had ever thought I would be feeling or thinking prior to hearing this, but it just like felt in my bones. When you feel truth and you're like, that's the thing. So, and again, it was kind of silly because my husband didn't even have a job. So, and he had just gotten out, like finished college. So yeah, I remember coming home from hearing him say that or from this podcast. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to have to quit my job and exclusively breastfeed this baby. Cause it was kind of another part of that concept for me of how many ways we're creating convenience from our natural body's abilities. You know what I mean? Like even for me, the concept of pumping after the more I started learning, I'm like, I don't even want to do that because there isn't this natural communication. Like I want to be available to do that. And, so yeah, we had this conversation and we decided that I would quit my job and he would figure it out. And bless his heart, he knew how important that was to me that he did, that I wouldn't say that was an easy thing to do. Because I think a lot of people think or can come up with the assumption, I want to say, that someone's just blessed to be able to do something. We had to really make things work for this to come to fruition. So it wasn't convenient. It wasn't easy by any means, but it was so important to me. So we made it happen. And I've exclusively breastfed both my babies, tandem fed, the whole bit. We've done the whole thing. And it's another imprint for me is just realizing how my consciousness passes through them through that breast milk too. It's not all just physical. And of course, there's the nurturing aspect to it. It's just, we are freaking amazing. You know what I mean? Like we're portals and then we can like alchemize this milk. Like it's just, I don't know. It's such a magical thing. And I can see the consciousness transfer in them as well. And it's just, yeah, I never thought I would want to become what I was. If anyone that knew me personally in my life, it's motherhood completely transformed me, 180 in every way. Cause I always know now, never say never. Cause I think I'm everything I said I would never be. And I thought I would miss working. And I don't even know if I'll ever go back. Yeah. That was just me because I think I really embraced in a lot of ways knowing that my baby, and I don't want to say too, if people feel really called and they love their work, I'm not saying anything of that. This is just my own experience I'm sharing, but I really embrace this concept of our babies are being born, but it really is also the death and rebirth of us. And it is over and over again with every birth we have. It is a whole rebirth and we become this new woman and we are walking. Women really do meet their most powerful selves in birth. And I think there's a reason why they sabotage that moment in so many ways because they know that. And so, yeah, to me, became more refined. And again, I've only had 2 and I'm excited to have more and become more refined in my life. But yeah, it is an interesting concept when we do look about the maiden and the mother and how we live in a society where this bounce back culture and how we try so hard to even look like the maiden when now we're always trying to be the maiden. And there's so many beautiful parts about the maiden, but when you can really embrace the mother, and for me, thinking like, what is a higher calling ever than raising the next generation? And of course I have so many other aspirations and passions. And of course I'm doing those things, but yes, there are times definitely where I have to pull myself back to reality and think like, really, what made me think there was a higher calling than these babies that chose me? So yeah, but I always get called back to that constantly when I get pulled to life. And then I'm like, oh yeah. So finding that balance, I wouldn't say is easy. I'm still always kind of trying to navigate that world. But yeah, honestly, it's funny because when we met a few weeks back was the first time I had ever left my babies. And that was a big deal for me.
Yeah, we met at Confluence. And even having this conversation, I'm sure in some ways is pulling you out of that role. So the navigation is sourced from your own intuitive experience. That's the difference, right? So my sense is that it doesn't mean that everything unfolds with ease necessarily. It just means that It's your process. That's what reclamation is. It's valuing the energetics, the dimensional reality that you have incarnated into enough, valuing it enough not to betray yourself, not to triangulate against yourself. And as you referenced, I too would argue that the agenda around capture of birth is the most insidious of all. Period. End of discussion. So, when you experience this alternative path, right? The disruption is legion. I mean, the disruption is, just if we want to look at the spiritual warfare, that is occurring, you are on the absolute front lines. And that's why I think you're such a wonderful resource, because I don't feel that armor, in your energy. And instead, it's almost like, the image that came to me while you were speaking just now, it's like you have this velvet bag, and you open up the top of it and show people what's inside. And it's like all these like twinkling, sparkling stars, like magic. It's magic in there. And that's what you get to experience. And, we deserve, I don't use that word very often, but the support, right? We really, really benefit from surrounding ourselves with others who have walked the path. So yeah, I'd love, Veda, for you to share how you offer, at least at this phase and season of your life, how you offer support to others who are, really looking to protect the process and guard the process from as early as possible. Cause there's this like knock-on effect, right? Like your success in long-term breastfeeding probably started with your, unpacking so much of your ancestral trauma in pregnancy, and then having the birth that you had. And then, so it's a knock-on effect, as opposed to the domino effect that can happen when you give it away, at any of these junctures. So yeah, at this point, how do you support families?
Yeah. So I created my own reclaiming your own birth story. And that's just based on what I did throughout my birth, unpacking it, and creating a new imprint. That's one thing that I offer. I also have created my own free birth guide. Cause with my second baby, we had a free birth, and that's just really what I created as an outline for myself on how to prepare for that. So I just offer that to other people as well. And I also help mothers and fathers have their baby, really have their baby out of the system and help raise them out of the system. So I help them get their private records, get the passport without the birth certificate, create a trust and the life insurance policy, the private banking, like really the whole way you can really kind of live out of the system. And yeah, just really expanding on this concept of sovereignty as a lifestyle, as a mindset, and just like living at that vibration. So I want to say, I think it's given me the most joy ever is once I decided to create this platform, which I truly feel is my baby's inheritance, because they've guided me to everything. It is theirs, and I owe 100% acknowledgement to them. But it's incredible how many mothers and fathers I meet out there that are pregnant, and they're like, I'm the one now showing up on their Instagram feed. And I think it's the most humbling thing in the world that they're asking their babies, guide me. And now they're being guided down this path, and how many there are. It gives me so much hope in humanity. I'll say that. It's so exciting to see where the world is going. And for me personally, like I told you before, I believed in doomsday. I thought the world was a scary place. No one should bring children here. But when I got pregnant, all of that had to fly away. And I could no longer believe in that. And what I knew I needed to do was create a world that I wanted to see my babies grow up in. So that's what I'm doing. I'm creating that. And I'm also seeing all these other mothers and fathers out there doing and creating it. And it's so exciting because we are creators. Like that is what we're here to do. We were created by the creator, and here we are creating this beautiful world that we're raising our babies in. And it is so exciting and magical. So anyway, that was a really long spiel of my favorite thing is connecting to all you out there that this resonates with, and creating this community that all our babies are, they're guiding the way, really. Like I said, I think I told Alec this, that I feel like a lot of our generation's purpose is to see what was and to alchemize it. And now we're bringing babies and kids into the world that are here to do what they don't have time to wait until their 20s, 30s, but above to discover it. They're here and they're ready to rule and reign. And that is our purpose, to help foster that. So here we are. Anyway.
So beautiful. So beautiful, Veda. I'm so grateful to and for you. And I really feel, like the world is a safer, more beautiful place because of the light that you shine. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. And I feel the same about you. Thank you for everything you're doing for the world. This is the world we're creating together. So I appreciate you so much. Mwah.